I went from going the trade route to going to get my 4-year degree at Sul Ross. Believe it or not, my first degree was animal science with a minor in equine science. I got out, had aspirations that I was going to go manage a ranch. I day worked all out in West Texas, but ironically enough, I wasn't that great of a cowboy, but my welding paid the bills. They kept me around more because of my welding. So once I graduated and left, I came back because my mom and stepdad were getting a divorce. So I found myself coming back home with a 16-foot stock trailer to load everything of my belongings and my mother's belongings up to find a place to live. What were we going to do next? So even though that 4-year degree, and I'm not the guy that has mine framed, to me it's just a piece of paper. I went back to these two hands. I went back to industry. The way God originally built me, that I tried going the wrong way. And I came back to the trades. So I'm pipe fitting, I'm welding, and I felt there was something bigger that God had for me. And I rodeoed and I roped steers, and I found myself in Pearsall, Texas at a church roping. And those, still the way these church ropings happen is you have to go to church, and your entry fees are paid by going to church. Well, I'm sitting probably about, it's more towards the back. I remember exactly, it was like third row from the back on the left side. And it didn't start like Jeremy just started this. It started by the preacher called a man up from the front. This was an old man. He barely made it up the steps. And when we got at the microphone, he spoke with the most soothing voice, the most calming voice. And he started telling his story. And he talked about how he was a teacher in Pearsall, Texas, and he was raised 3 children. He had two sons and a daughter. The daughter, through the divorce, went on to live with their mother, and he went on to raise the 2 boys. He spoke of a story that involved education, inspiring young adults, but it included agriculture. And I found myself, the more he talked, the closer I was getting to the edge of my seat. I was hanging on to every word that he was saying because it was like God was talking straight to me through him. It wasn't until the very end of his testimony that he said, "Some of y'all may know one of my sons. His name's George Strait. My name is John Byron Strait." And I promise you, if we'd have had idiot devices, aka cell phones back then, because that was the spring of 2004, we wouldn't have a national shortage for educators. John had a way of painting the picture, or Mr. Strait had a way of painting the picture that inspired me. I knew there was something else. I don't remember much of the roping that day, but I do remember the very next weekend I found myself at a Curtis roping in Kerrville, Texas, and a man by the name of Larry Waltersberger. Larry was an angel on earth. He taught at Clark High School for 27 years, and he taught metal trades. Larry changed a ton of people's lives. He wasn't just a teacher, he was a role model. There was men that still talked about Larry to this day as their second dad. And Larry wrote up to me and said, "Hey, you're not happy with what you're doing, and I'm fixing to retire. You need to come take my job and become a teacher." Had it not been for John Byron Strait's testimony, I'd have laughed Larry smooth out of the barn, because that just wasn't me. You have to remember, I started this story with adversity, correct? I was raised by that single mom. Didn't know my real dad till I was 27. You carry a hatchet holding the handle when you're raised that way. And I'm sure by looking out in this crowd that there's many of y'all can relate, right? Because there's no perfect home life. There's no perfect way to grow up. That's fantasy land. I hope that everybody faces adversity because it helps build you to what you do with that adversity. So for me, I went ahead and went back to Sul Ross. I called them, and luckily they were running a short format graduate level course to become a teacher. So I did it all in less than 4 months, and I started my career at Clark High School, where Mr. Waltersberger had retired. Kind of a funny story there is, this is straight from industry into education. That's night and day difference, okay? So I get to the last period of the day, and I'm talking, and over half the class is looking off. And I said, "Ooh, man, what's going on?" So I asked the kid in front, I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He looked around and he said, "Well, you don't know?" I said, "I don't know what." He goes, "Well, They're all brand new to America. They don't speak English. They were from Africa, India, and Mexico. And so we were able to start the first ever all ESL welding class at Clark High School, and it worked. They pulled all the English speakers, they left all the non-English speakers, and when we first lit the torch, half the kids took off out of the shop running. But probably to this day, one of the most inspiring classes that I ever taught, because every one of those kids are still welding to this day. So that was the first sign that I had of that spark from that adversity of going, man, I'm connecting with these kids and I'm changing people's lives through putting their hands to work. So then I got a phone call from a man by the name of Rex Owens. He said, hey, Boerne ISD is looking to start a welding program at Boerne High School. So it came up, I applied for the job, and we started the program. It's hard to believe that that was 21 years ago that we started it in an empty building. It was built in 1972 or 73 with an incredible group of kids that had the same vision that I had, right? And that was to do something bigger. I believed in them. They were all mainly seniors. And I remember walking in that first day and every one of those kids' feet were propped up on the tables. And I grabbed their feet, spun them around, and said, hey, God meant for your feet to be on the ground. And I said, we got a lot to do. We're going to start building this program. We didn't have much, literally like a chop saw, cutting torch, a handful of welders. And we came up with our Muscle Guy logo. We painted it on the wall. And that adversity that the devil kept working was still there, right? They were like, Vic, they just passed the bond. This wall's not going to stay here. Vic, this logo's a waste of time. I said, I promise you that this wall's going with me when we build that shop. And those that are ex-students from Boerne High School that are here tonight, they know I live up to my word, right? That wall is sitting at Champion High School shop. And that was the first time that I took great pride in being able to grab the devil by his head and cut a horn off on that one, right? I knew we were on to something. And we started with just believing that you can put your mind to it, you can build it. And it was like building blocks. And then we started chasing the show and the contest. That first year we hauled around the state and we won our first state title. And we won our first district and our state title. Well, we fast forward that we won 10 consecutive, 10 straight, 20 plus state championships, won every AgMech show out there. And all of a sudden, God ended up changing the whole course of our program. And that was in 2016. It was a phone call, I'll never forget, January phone call. Only thing I'm mad about is I wish that I would have recorded it, that phone call. It was from a local hero. And when I say hero, I say this guy is like why the movie Rambo was made. His name was Donald Burton. He lived in Bergheim. He was 7th group, Green Beret. Willingly jumped out of good airplanes and good helicopters for me to have this stool to sit on and us to have that table to sit on. And the call was that he had spent 20 years in rehab after being 10 years active duty to hold a weapon again. He was a candidate for a puff and blow. Literally, he had no dexterity in his hands. But the conventional hunting blind was holding him back. And at that time, we were building an airdrop trailer for Cavender, Stuart Cavender, that could load Corvettes. It was 30 foot long, sat on airbags. It was one of the baddest trailers on planet Earth. That's where my focus was. God sent this phone call coming in. So the next morning, I didn't question it. The next morning, I went ahead and started making phone calls and got all the metal donated, got all the running gear donated, and I called him back, and he wanted us to build the blind on his trailer. So I said, well, just please, sir, bring me your trailer. And we parked it. We started designing his. Well, when it came time to unveil it, and I went back up, I got to watch the kids. Every kid in the program started working with a labor of love on this trailer. I'm talking every kid, even the kid that's hard to motivate, hard to get to come to school. They were busting at the seams to get out there and start working on this trailer. And that we literally built it in 30 days. In 30 days, we built it. Mind you, this other trailer, we went and won Houston AgMech show. We won San Antonio. We won all these other shows. But I didn't see the same spark that I'm seeing when these kids are building this trailer. So the day of the giveaway, the first man that shows up, and I thought I'd kept it a pretty good secret. The first man that shows up is in a green truck, and thank God he hung his jacket facing the passenger side, because the jacket was struggling to stay on the hook. It was leaned over so heavy with all of his awards that he had received. And I'm not a very smart guy, but I saw that it was all green, right? The jacket, everything was green. And he asked me who I was. I said, I'm Dorman Vick. He said, are you the man that built the trailer for Donald Burton? I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, then you're going to have the only guy to have the privilege to know the story, because that was my man. That was his command sergeant major that had showed up for him. So it was the man that saved Donald's life. When we did the unveil, it felt like half the town was there. And we opened the door, and the first door was Donald's trailer that was just sitting there with no blind. And this American hero keeps his composure. He's confused. We opened bay door number 2, and here's this incredible brand new brine. Well, Donald paused, and he had a banner. And he made his precious wife, Patricia, that, mind you, true angel, married Donald in the chair. She's an incredible woman. She's holding this banner, and it's the Air Force motto all the way. So it gives me goosebumps now to think about it. That was God really opening my eyes to what all the way meant, right? So Donald keeps his composure, and he goes down the side of the trailer, and he turns the corner, and all of a sudden he's looking at the man that saved his life. Hallmark can't come up with that type of story. And our students got to see that. They right there in that moment, they realized freedom isn't free. And I realized there's no textbook out there that can instill that. And what I'm fixing to say next is it can get controversial on how I say it, but I want to address slowly how I'm going to say it, in case I say it more. Vocational education is how we put the white back in the red, white, and blue. They divided us. They took the white out and made it a red or blue thing. Putting our kids' hands back to work, teaching them to understand freedom isn't free, to love this nation, love their self, love their fellow classmate. It's critical to the future of this great democracy, right? We have to do that. And by seeing the power of those kids' hands going back to work, really changed the course of things for me. We started focusing. Well, I'm pretty hard-headed, so we kept making a few more runs to show. And in 2019, I believe it was, I still was like, all right, let's go do one more big run. Let's go try to win some of these banners. And that's when God let Michael Crawford come into the picture. That was our second mobile hunting blind that we built for Michael Crawford. And that was incredible. The Lord let Jesse James build a Nomad rifle and show up. And that was, mind you, the second time that we've given rifles away there at the shop, and only in Texas, right, that we can do that. And the hunting blinds. But Jesse was able to come in the shop. And really the inspiring, cool thing that goes back to God allowing all this to happen was back at Boerne High School when we first came up with the Larry logo and we put it on the wall, the muscle guy, we stood back and we're like, man, it needs something more. Well, what it needed was the best welders in the world passed through this shop. Only God knew that the King of Welding would be standing underneath that sign that many years later, from 2005 to 2019. And Jesse started something in front of that sign that he turned around, he looked at the muscle guy, and he bumps me, and he goes, flexes. He flexes, and we flexed and took this funny picture, that what seemed to be funny at the time. But since then, lots of other important things and pictures happened in front of that sign. So we rock along there, and I'm still pretty hard-headed, and God had to take and ground me in October of 21 with COVID-19. This is where the untold story of Dorman Vick happens, but it's the most critical story. And that's my incredible wife, Stephanie. If it wasn't for her, I would have never been able to follow the Lord's path to this program, because what most people don't realize is with success comes a lot of scars and heartaches to our families, right? It's the late nights that you're there, that you're not at home with your wife or your children. Well, in October of 21, I came down with COVID-19, and she struggled at home with me because I'm pretty hard-headed. I was pretty scared to death about, hey, if we go to the hospital, I'm probably going to die. You're going to drop me off. It's just anxiety. Well, it got to the point, I believe it was a Sunday, I think, and she said, look, I'm struggling to keep your O2 at 89 and you're on oxygen. She had me laying flat on my stomach because I didn't realize that that's the easiest way we can breathe. So you talk about adversity, right? Got through some major adversity. Of course, I was scared to death. And rightfully so, God humbled me all the way down to show me that tears are okay, right? It's okay to be scared in our journeys through adversity. And we did a lot of praying, we did a lot of phone calls, and hey, it's not a program, it's a family, because she's on the phone with ex-parents of students of mine that I taught saying, hey, where's the best hospital? Well, we ended up at St. Luke's, and it was actually pretty much a last-minute call, and we were going to go to either Kerrville or St. Luke's. And so, anyway, once she got me there, they hooked me up to oxygen, and I heard the doctor say to her, said, Miss Vick, you need to get prepared. He's more than likely not going to make it. Those are some pretty powerful words to hear, even to a hard-headed guy like me, right? And so nothing's wrong with my ears, it's my lungs. I don't plan on dying right now. Take that conversation outside. Well, Stephanie never left my side, even, and it was a blessing because two friends of mine had gone in the month of August with COVID-19. Both of their wives dropped them off at the same hospital and were not allowed inside. One brother made it out, one brother did not. So it's an absolute blessing that God allowed my wife to be able to stay there by my side, because the anxiety was crazy. It was in ICU. I was in 30 days. I was down to about 100, and her and I will argue, probably 160 pounds. I felt like I was a 90-pound dude. But God pulled me through. When he pulled me through, I had to do rehab to learn how to walk again. Didn't know if I could really weld ever again. Lincoln Electric came through with a big hood that had a HIPAA filter so that I could actually go back to teaching. And I felt every breath. I was there again. I was really scared. But that was the time that General Leroy Sisco and some local incredible men, David Satsky that owns DOS Underground Utilities, came together and said, hey, we want to form a foundation. Not a booster club, a foundation. And we called it Welding Student Support Foundation. And man, what's happened since then is why I'm here tonight, to try to rally our community, because God, not Dorman Vick, God has allowed something very special to happen right here in Boerne, Texas. All of everything that we've done led ourselves up to General Leroy Sisco opening the door up to former longest-serving governor and former Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry. A lot of y'all have heard the story of us rebuilding Governor Perry's dad's truck. But the journey with Governor Perry started long before that truck, way long before the truck. Governor Perry was a product of vocational education. And when I heard his testimony that in Paint Creek, Texas, he learned how to weld, it really sparked me. Well, Governor Perry, him and I are on the phone one night, and he's telling me the story of how when he graduated from Texas A&M University, there you go. They made us all scared last week, though. Was all for ratings, right? All for ratings. So when he's telling me this story that when he graduated, that he came home because his father was a dryland cotton farmer and a rancher, and he thought it was a great idea to get rid of all the Hereford cattle and get some Brahma cattle from South Texas. So he brings them all back home, and they had a set of wooden cattle pens, and he said he unloaded them, and those cattle wrecked this pen, trashed it, completely tore it up. So he said, here I find myself out there building and welding a new set of cattle pens. He's in the middle of telling me a story, and I said, whoa, wait. I said, stop right there. And I hear this, excuse me? And I thought, oh man, I done messed up. I'm just a high school welding teacher telling a man that made America energy independent for the first time to stop. And I said, the world needs to hear this story, period. The world needs to hear this story because there's too big of a debate going on right now in America of, well, going to the trades is the wrong thing to do. You need the 4-year degree. My argument is if you are 70 and over, vocational education was across this whole nation. From California to New York, north to south, it was everywhere. And you learn the principles of how to build a birdhouse, how to drive a nail, how to control a molten puddle of steel, and how to weld. There's a major sense of accomplishment that comes to being able to take a concept in your mind and making it become reality. It makes you stand stronger. You're more confident. And especially if you put God in the equation of the story to build a better person out of using your hands, that's when we're moving the needle. Well, then it goes along and General Cisco brings in Texas Commissioner Sid Miller into the equation, which the Commissioner of Ag has put us on his television show. Brought in the Texas Commissioner of Education, Mr. Mike Morath, into the equation. He's brought Peter Holt. So Peter Holt that owns Holt Cat. Last year we did the first ever certification. So our kids were offered certifications while they were still in high school to be entry-level welders going straight out of high school to go straight to work for $85,000 a year. That's how we close the widening skills gap in America. We start pulling in our companies to take more vested interest into our kids and to where our kids leave with a better decision-making process onto what they want to do when they leave. Then all of a sudden, just this school year, look up and here's Marty Berry coming in with General Leroy Cisco. Marty Berry, there's no bigger name on the Texas Gulf Coast than Marty Berry when it comes to welding and fabricating, and Marty Berry is now behind us. And naturally, we have the Strait family. When my students found out the testimony story of how I got into education, they said we need to do something. Well, John Byron Strait was 91 years old when he passed away. So they decided to build a coffee table that looks like a guitar and an old set of cattle working pins, and they built a rose for every year John was on earth with us. And they built a tribute table for him. I didn't think in a million years that there was any way that we'd get the king of country music to come to a high school campus. The last time was in the late 70s whenever George did his student teaching at Texas State University to be, of all things, an ag teacher. And through the grace of only God, George and Bubba came to the shop that day, and we had a very small, private, student-only presentation to be able to award George this table. And it's a legacy table so that someday it can be passed down through the family to where right now it has John's cowboy hat and boots in it, and then someday it'll have George's guitar to be passed all the way down through Bubba on down through the years. But George even said something while he was there for the couple hours he was there, was that he learned how to weld when he was in school in Pearsall, Texas. So I start hearing this theme come together, right? You've got 3-star generals learning how to do leather work. You got longest serving governor learning how to weld. Now you got George Strait that learned how to weld. And then we brought in Bill Goldberg. So Bill came in, which most of us in the room know Bill, right? He's got a heart bigger than the state of Texas, and he's done incredible things for us. We've got Jesse James that put us on his national television show. Joe and Amanda Martin, that are Martin Bros, that they're behind us. This is all saying this isn't because of Dorman Vick. This is because we as a community here in Kendall County, in Boerne, Texas, have a chance to make a national movement for vocational education. That's what excites me. And with that, we have a chance to be able to have our hands on the steering wheel and dictate how that is. And I believe firmly that the only way Dorman Vick's involved is if God is leading the way on this charge, right? And that we do His work, His mission, and there again, put the white back in the red, white, and blue. So the foundation that General Cisco started, and Mr. Satsky and 2 other incredible men, Mr. Collins that grew up here in Boerne, Texas, and Tony Corolla that I've taught both of his children that are the board members. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. It's allowed to be able to take donations, give in-kind donations, letters back, and continue this movement to where we can scream loud enough for not just our state capital to hear, but all the way to the White House to hear. And I believe so much in that earlier this year in January, the Commissioner of Education, Governor Perry, and the foundation had me going around the state to do the last video that we did about me traveling to other vocational programs and seeing what was offered. Well, the first stop that we were at, we were in Dubitsky, Texas. And at Dubitsky, the producer asked me at dinner, said, "Hey Vic, what happened to all your federal projects? Because we're the only we're the only program in the nation to have ever built 3 projects for the federal government. We built the first one in 2007-8. We built a mobile deer capture trailer for the fever tick eradication program. Then in 2009-10, we built a mobile dipping vat. The last one that had been built was in 1963 for the scabies eradication in North Texas. And then in 2010-11, we built a mobile scratch and spray trailer for the fever tick program." So the producer's asking me where this stuff's at, and I'm like, man, it's been 14 years. I don't know. I said, Mr. Bowers, my connection, had passed away after a 50-year career with the government, and we discussed it, didn't think anything of it. Well, a week later, my phone rings, and I didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number, and it went to voicemail. And it was a man saying that he was with the state of Texas, and that he was calling because he wanted to commission me to build me and my students to build another project. And I was like, wait a minute. Like, I'm a jokester in my own life, and I'm thinking, this producer's pulling a heck of a joke on me. So I go home, I tell my wife, and she's like, really? You ought to call him back. I'm like, no, I think it's a joke. So I call him back, and I'm like, hey, I tell you what, bud, can you send me pictures of our projects? And he goes, yeah, I'll do that. So about 3 weeks goes by, and I told the wife, I'm like, yeah, this is all a joke. I hadn't heard anything. 3 weeks is too long. Next thing I know, I get an email. It's got all the pictures, and it has an official write-up from the Texas Animal Health Commission. And I'm like, Lord, you know how dumb I am and how hard-headed I am. You had to take me almost to death to wake me up, and now you're pulling this one on me. So thanks to the Welding Student Support Foundation, we're now building a mobile dipping vat for the state of Texas. No high school's ever built for the state of Texas, so this incredible group of kids this year has been handpicked by God to build this vat. I don't believe it's just a project. I believe 1,000% of every ounce of my being, this is the vessel that we use coming right here out of Kendall County in Boerne, Texas, that we get loud with this project. We have very powerful people that live in this community, right? We've got the incredible PRCA presidents. We've got Bill Goldberg. The list is a mile long of what we have around here. We've got major company owners to get behind this. Our cattle numbers right now are the lowest they've been since the 1950s. We've got the screwworm coming out of Mexico or South America. It's within 70 miles of our border right now. The last time we fought that was in the 60s and the 70s, and it almost decimated the white-tailed deer population and the cattle of South Texas. And we still have the fever tick, which stopped the American cattle drives, and the whole reason the Texas Animal Health Commission formed was because of the fever tick. But when we have a widening skills gap, our biggest advocate in the nation is Mike Rowe. The Lord's letting Mike Rowe get pretty close to our program right now. Things are starting to circulate. We need a lot of prayers that follows all the way through, because this dipping vat is 40 foot long, 14 foot tall, and 8 foot wide. Its presence is as big as you get that can go down the road. I believe that God's given it to us. It's what do we do? How do we fight the adversity of our nation? We all know the widening skills gap is real. When Marty Berry came in and talked to us, he said the average age, you really need to take this away tonight, average age of his welders, 5,000 employees, 58. 58 years old. By the time our freshmen and sophomores graduate and get to that 58-year-old, what do you think his patients are going to be like in his early 60s? Not going to be real high. That's a problem. We have to act now. We talk about military, but nothing's discussed with our kids. Everybody thinks you go military, you get a what? A gun. They don't realize you can be an electrician, you can be a plumber, you can be a welder, you can be a mechanic in the military. It's time we start discussing that. Vocational education, when you hear me say it, it could be digital vocational education. My theory is if it doesn't lead to a job, to filling a job, we have no business teaching it. We need to go back to what makes sense, what's common sense. I've had the pleasure of seeing it through the years, and I've seen, I don't want to single just one kid out, but I've seen Mr. Kennedy walk in, and I proudly say that through the years, we had team captains on our athletic field. And I will proudly say that 90% came out of our program because the mind controls the body. And when done right, vocational education, you can build very strong men and women with strong mental aptitude. And I believe it carries on and off the field. Whenever you have the ability to actually see these kids shine. For Cole, and he didn't know tonight I was going to use his story as the example up here, but I remember Cole started with a big struggle to build a bed frame. And let me tell you, that bed frame was a terrible set of Legos for Cole. He had a lot of bumps, didn't he, Cole, with it. But Cole's a local business owner now, knocking it out of the park, building incredible metal structures in Kendall County, the Texas Hill Country. That's what it's about. The whole way this thing's set up, we're not getting tax breaks once our kids graduate, right? You get a break when your kid graduates from college, but not paying taxes. We have to have more kids that come back to our local communities to invest back, build companies, start the trades. Rittiman's going to retire sometime. Who's going to take his spot? I think we're starting to see that when we need our house repainted, we need a toilet done, we need a ceiling fan put in, a hot water heater. The cost is only going up. To have civilized life, we have to have our tradespeople. And it's okay for our children to be in cheer, but still take a shop class. Amen. We're not brainwashing them to do that. And it's real where we're at. It blows my mind that a tape measure, for instance, that's the gateway key to all trades. We have kids that can't read a tape measure. We have AP dual credit kids that can't read tape measures. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. We need to be able to close those. And it's so simple, but yet it's so exciting that we have the answer right now tonight, and that's getting behind the Welding Student Support Foundation. Following us, we have it on these columns, the little QR code is Vick Welding Nation is on our Instagram. The television shows are in the bio. I try to keep it coming on what's going on in the shop to be able to highlight it. But if you leave tonight feeling inspired to say, let's take on the adversity of this widening skills gap. Let's make a difference. Because I'm telling you, it's God that's allowed these people to come in, not Dorman Vick. It's God. I've just been smart enough finally to get over in the passenger seat and let him drive. Amen. And it's been an amazing journey getting this far. I'm very excited about what the future holds. And to see kids able to leave our school making $85,000 their very first year out of school to go into the trades, that's what it's about. The success stories of these kids when they get out is inspiring to say the least. Another one that comes to mind is Morgan Burgett. Morgan was top 5 in her class at Champion High School. She went on to Purdue University for biomedical. She'll say that when she came through, she didn't know what sweet tea was, right? But by the time she left the program, she did. She called me after the first semester, and she said, Vic, biomedical, I don't think it's for me. I said, quit going against the grain of what God wants. Manufacturing's where you need to be. She switched her majors at Purdue. She went on to run the Purdue lab, machine lab at Purdue, and she's now with Polaris as a lead engineer. That's what I'm talking about. That's what it's about, right? Is filling those stories. There again, I know I'm supposed to talk, but what makes me proud is talking more about the students and those success stories. Another one's Brandon Rodriguez here in Boerne, CB Welding Solutions. He started with a vision, right, to be able to build a program. He started with his junior year, I guess it was, after the last show run of 19. He said, Vic, I want to start my own company. And we started that way and building on it. He's a local taxpayer now and has done incredible. So when you leave tonight pondering the big debate, right? Do we support vocational education or do we continue just supporting the four-year college? I say we support all of it. And we put military back into this equation to be able to explain to our kids all of it. Let's quit picking our kids' destiny by saying only college. Because we've seen what colleges have done. They've scrambled our kids' brains. They don't talk about using these hands, right? It's that the paper saves you. What saves you is the hands. How do you face adversity? What are you going to do with that dictates your success. If you disagree with what I'm saying, the only thing I can think of that success would come with no adversity is buying a lottery ticket. And I hope you lose. You've got to face adversity. You can't cry. I tell students all the time, listen, here's my story. And it took a long time for me to come out with my story of not meeting my father until I was 27. And I think it's a good way to kind of wrap this whole thing up tonight. It was, and my wife can yell at me if I'm wrong, but my mother said, it was one night we were sitting on the couch, and my mom said, hey, it was Wilbur and I's anniversary today. I said, I dare you to call him. And she said, you dare me? I said, yeah, I dare you to call him. Back then, this was old. We had landlines. So I went to grab the landline, and that was the first time I'd ever heard my father's voice. I went on to find out my grandmother, a couple days later, was dying. So I ended up going ahead and driving into San Antonio. It was weird. I walked in, and they all of a sudden knew me. Aunts, uncles jump up. They knew it was me. I said, everybody needs to sit down. You had 27 years to do it on your terms. We're doing it on my terms now. And when I look back on all that, I think that's why I've been so blessed to relate to these kids and to relate to a bigger mission. It's okay to have faced adversity. It's okay to not have a perfect life, and it's okay to talk about it because that helps others heal. It helps inspire others. Donald Burton inspired me by a single phone call. John Byron Strait inspired me by a single testimony. Your conversations after tonight and through tonight, they matter. You can dictate a person's life. You have no idea that somebody may be amongst us wanting to end their life tonight. But because you love them, you care about them, and you invest in them, it matters. That's how we save the greatest test of this great nation that we're living in. That's how we save it. We go back to a four-letter word of love. But unfortunately, hate is a four-letter word too. But that's why the three-letter word of God is a three-letter word. We focus on God and we bring love and on a common mission, and we fix this thing. And we bring it together. And we do it together as Kendall County proud. Thank y'all tonight for an opportunity to tell y'all about an incredible program. Look forward to y'all following us on Instagram, getting behind. Mr. Satsky's here tonight. You can get a hold of him to be able to get on the winning team. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Vick. You also have, you got some piece of paper out here with a QR code, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we got some QR codes out here if you ever want to think